safe to say that probably everybody remembers fairy tales from their childhood, and either when it was from Disney films or like books or even told orally. But fairy tales have actually been around since the 2nd century, and I have to say I was a big Disney fan, so I've probably seen like almost all of the fairy tale-based Disney movies. And I actually looked into the fairy tales one day and found out that they were actually based on like really vulgar, violent stories that were definitely not intended for children at all. The 3 that I'm going to be talking to you about are of rape, necrophilia, which is this sexual attraction to corpses, and love that ends in suicide. So the first is Little Red Riding Hood. And the early versions of this story is like filled with sexual innuendos. They're for adults. And Charles Perrault, he's a French author. He wrote his rendition in 1697, and he portrayed her as like an attractive young woman. And she was in like her teens, and then the wolf was actually metaphorically written as a sexual predator. So after the wolf like eats the grandmother and everything, he disguises himself as her. And when Little Red Riding Hood appears, he actually like straight up tells her like, take off your clothes and climb into bed with me. And she obeys. And so this is a quote from Charles Perrault's book. It says, "The wicked wolf threw himself on Little Red Riding Hood and gobbled her up." So it's like it's like a little hint, because he didn't just gobble her up, he threw himself at her. So this is how it ends. There's no happy ending. She doesn't save herself, or she doesn't get saved. So she gets raped by the sexual predator. And speaking of sexual creepy predators, Snow White's prince wasn't exactly like the knight in shining armor. Like the Brothers Grimm, they were 2 German brothers, and they wrote their rendition of this fairy tale in 1812, and it's really similar to like Disney versions, but with the 7 dwarves and everything, until the prince comes, and that's where it gets a little freaky. Okay, so in this early adaptation, the prince sees Snow White dead in the coffin, and he like falls in love with her dead body. So it's just like he like feels the need to like stare at her all the time and like worship the dead body. And so he convinces the dwarves to let him keep the body. And so he brings her to the castle, and like he actually has servants that carry the coffin around wherever he goes. And so through a series of events, she eventually wakes up, and then they get married right away. And the queen notices that it's Snow White, and so she gets jealous, and she has like these hot red shoes, iron shoes, that she makes Snow White wear. And so she dances in them, and then eventually Snow White dies. And so again, there's no happy ending. It ends with a death, and death is presented in many fairy tales, such as in The Little Mermaid. And in 1836, Hans Christian Andersen, he wrote this original version of Little Mermaid in 1836, and it's really similar to the Disney version. Like, it has the same storyline where like the Little Mermaid gives up her fins for legs because she wants to fall in love with the human prince. And then in this original story, it actually like the legs actually give her like excruciating pain. And so after her marriage, she like starts to like, she can't take her pain anymore. So she goes back to the sea witch, and then she tells her in order to get her fins back, she would have to like pierce the heart of the prince and let the blood drip on her legs. And so she can't find herself to do this, so she eventually commits suicide. And now I hope I've informed everyone of like the original disturbing versions of these 3 stories. And yeah, again, these tales are filled with rape, necrophilia, and suicide, and somehow they were rewritten over the centuries for children. And in conclusion, these are just three of the few examples that are out there. I mean, many examples that